Good evening. It is now 6:30 on Monday, November the 22nd, 2021, and I now call the Winton City School Board of Education meeting to order. Please rise with me and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Seymour, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Birdie?
Present.
Mrs. Kuhn? Dr. Cupoletti?
Present.
Mr. McGowans?
Present.
Dr. Johnson?
Present. Thank you. I guess you can hear my voice is a little weak, so if I sort of run out of sound, Mr. Birdie is going to pick up where I leave off. But I'll try to get through everything. Our next item on the agenda was a recess, and we're going to forego the recess because we're just getting started. And so nobody has a problem with that, of course. We have it
No.
just getting started.
None from me.
Okay, and then the item after that is 3.01, public comments, and I don't have any. Mr. Seymour, you didn't receive any, I don't have any, so thank you. The next item on the agenda is 4.01, which is the Winton Woods Teachers Association representative. Do we have a representative here tonight for the Winton Woods Teachers Association?
No, we do not.
Okay, so we're going to move on past that. The next item is 4.02, which is the Ohio Association of Public School Employees. Do we have a representative for them tonight?
Yes, we do.
Right. Oh, you can take the mic. Yes,
You get the podium.
yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am just here to represent Ms. Shonda Gordon, our president. I am the secretary of our OPSEs, and I'm just here to represent in attendance. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you give me your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Leishiana Smith.
Thank you, Lishiana.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the next item on the agenda is 5.01, which is the approval of minutes. Board, unless you see any necessary changes to these minutes, a motion would be in order.
I'd like to make a motion for the approval of the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, would you please call that vote?
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowans?
Aye.
Dr. Johnson?
Aye. That vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 6.01, which is the treasurer's report for the financial statements for October 2021. Mr. Seymour, you have the floor.
Yes, for the month of October, our year-to-date revenues within the general fund were at $19.6 million. For the month, we received approximately $1.9 million, which was mostly our state foundation and tuition payments. Our year-to-date expenditures within the general fund were at $16.3 million, which is currently running approximately 3.2% under budget. Activity for all funds, we had an unencumbered fund balance of $35.1 million, $20 million of which was the general fund, and still approximately $7.8 million remaining in the building funds. That's basically a summary of the October financial reports.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. With no objections being heard, let the financial statements for the month of October 2021 be submitted for audit. The next item on the agenda is 7.01, which is the treasurer's recommendations for the investments for October 2021. Mr. Seymour, you have the floor.
Yes, for the month of October, we had approximately $35 million invested in certificates of deposit or within the accounts. And for the general fund of $22 million invested, we earned $9,286. And in all the building funds of $27 million, we earned about $906. Sorry to say, the interest rates are terrible, for a total of $10,191 for the month of October.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Board, a motion would be in order.
I'll make a motion to approve the investment report as presented.
I'll second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions for discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, would you please call that vote?
Yes, Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Capoletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan's?
Aye.
Dr. Johnson?
Aye. That vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 7.02, which is the 5-year forecast for the fiscal year 2022 through 2026. Mr. Seymour, you have the floor.
Yes, I'll just do a short little synopsis of the 5-year forecast. As I had mentioned earlier, we were waiting to do the forecast when we did our appropriations. We normally do them at the same time. We were waiting to get the latest information from the state of Ohio. Unfortunately, we are still waiting, because they have postponed that now to December. So hopefully in December, they'll come out with the final amounts to be supported to the schools. But we still have a deadline of November 30th to get the 5-year forecast in. So I've included the information that is the best of my knowledge at this time. What have we included in the 5-year forecast? I've made some assumptions. Cut Patterson, the Fair Share Funding Plan, is still in the process of implementation. We do have a good economy going, and it continues to recover, so they feel that the Fair Share Funding Plan will go on as adopted, and we have anticipated no additional cuts at this time from the governor. Cuts are not a topic of discussion anymore for K-12 instruction.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Seymour. Yes, go ahead.
I have a couple more. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Basically, from the state funding at this time, it's broken down into new areas. We now will have more restricted funds than we've had in the past. As you know, Student Success and Wellness used to be in a separate fund. It has now become DPIA, or Disadvantaged Pupil Impact Aid, and that's going to be approximately $1.1 million for the district. We also will have special ed transportation of $300,000, support for preschool of $180,000, and they have moved catastrophic reimbursement to restricted funding at this time. So that leaves us a formula of $17.6 million for unrestricted, meaning the Board of Education can spend those funds as they choose. The projected revenue for 22 is now at 19.4, and then in 2023 we will see an increase of approximately 1.3 million based on the latest information I have, which comes to 20,720,000, and then we have been advised to leave that constant because it will be a new biennium, and we will have to see if the Fair Share Funding Plan continues into the new state budget. You will notice that the projected revenue does include, again, a $3 million emergency levy. Now it will not begin until January of 2023. We have included all negotiated agreements within the salaries. I have not projected any salary increases. However, we have left all step increases into the projections for the 5 years. The biggest major change with the new Fair Share Funding Plan are expenditures will go down approximately $4.2 million. We used to receive this money in through the state and spend it out through community schools of $2.1 million, Ed Choice $370,000, John Peterson $325,000, Autism Scholarships $335,000, and open enrollment out $1.1 million. All of these funds will no longer flow through the general fund and have reduced our state funding by approximately $4 million. On the other side of that, it's also reduced our purchase services for tuition by approximately $4.2 million. So it's basically out of the 5-year forecast both in revenues and expenditures. However, the expenditures have been increased for the Student Success and Wellness, which will now be DPIA. Some other assumptions made this most current year, we had a healthcare increase of 7%. Trends continue to be a 7% in healthcare, so I've projected a 7% increase in healthcare and a 5% increase in dental. Revenues versus expenditures, our operating cash balance throughout the forecast. You can see that in fiscal year 21, we did receive more than we spent. 2 years prior to that, we were slightly dipping into our cash reserve. And then just as all 5-year forecasts across the state, you will see all the districts start to dip into their cash reserves in order to, when revenues are constant, you can't help but go into your savings to continue with inflation or costs of living. And then here I'm just simply trying to share with you the difference between the blue and the green bar is your cash balance. And they start, when they intersect, that's when you start deficit spending. So the 5-year emergency levy will expand that and keep us afloat through 2026. And that's simply a summary rounded to the nearest millions of the 5-year forecast that we'll be posting out on the website. I don't know if you have any questions, but that's basically an overview of the 5-year forecast, which is due at the end of the month, and we still haven't received our voucher system on how we're being funded.
Mr. Seymour,
Yes.
when we have the opportunity to have public conversations outside of the community, not just in the schools, I'm not sure how the board feels, but I think it would be really, really good if you show the intersecting lines of what's really needed in the district as opposed to what people assume will be needed. Because once the lines intersect, then you start having a different story. And I think it's important for the public to see that these are real numbers that make sense as opposed to what they believe we're just doing a theoretical perspective about.
Right. I try. Yeah.
Yeah.
A graph would be very helpful to me.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just
Yeah.
the one that was up there?
Go back to
Okay.
that one.
Yeah.
That is the one.
That's key for me.
Okay. Yes.
Well, or the other way to show it would be the actual cash, the fund
That is a good one
balance.
as well. Yeah.
That one?
Well, that's the difference between what we're taking in and what we're spending, right?
Yeah, that's your
I'm
actual.
Yeah, I'm talking about what the cash balance is on an annual basis. So, I mean, we're saying at the end of 2022, we would have 13.8 million, and then it's just going to go down to close to zero 2026.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the difference. But the last year, that's where the red and the blue almost meet again. The difference between green and blue and red and the difference between the red and the blue is your cash balance with a levy. The difference between the space between green and blue is without the levy.
I think a lot of people would understand that. Do you agree, Dr. Cupoletti?
It's my way of understanding,
Okay.
yes.
It's helpful as well. Board, are there any other questions? Well, we need to get a motion on the floor.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the 5-year forecast for fiscal years 2022 through 2026 as presented.
I'll second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any other questions or discussion around the 5-year forecast? Only thing I can say is I do appreciate the graphs. They kind of make it plain to me as opposed to looking at large numbers, so I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Seymour. If there's nothing else, Mr. Seymour, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Dr. Johnson?
Aye. That vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 7.03, which is resolution declaring the necessity to levy a tax in excess of the 10 mil limitation. Mr. Seymour, it's back to you.
Yes, as you saw in the 5-year forecast, we have put back in the 5-year, $3 million emergency levy. It's hopeful that at that time, by then hopefully it passes and people can see that we were trying to utilize the dollars that they gave us to the best that we could. And also, we will know what the state is going to do. That fair share funding formula comes through. Winton Woods, as Representative Miranda pointed out, stands to gain almost $7 million, but phased in over a 6-year period, which is 3 budget bienniums, and we're now being told to not budget beyond the current biennium. So it's hard to predict that. So at the end of that 5-year period, we would know if they came through with the state funding, and we could see where the district stood financially at that time. So as the treasurer, I have to almost recommend, and Mr. Smith agrees, we have to continue to push a little bit for a levy. And just out of curiosity, when it finally gets collected, that will be 14 years since we had an increase in real estate taxes. Our current real estate taxes are around $23 million. So after 14 years, we're asking for approximately less than 1% rate of inflation per year. And if you look at the cost of living index, that's gone up 23% in that same time period. So it's not like we're asking for something that is not needed. We do have to continue to increase our real estate collections because the local taxes is what still funds Ohio schools. So with that, I'm recommending that we again place on the ballot in May a 5-year, $3 million emergency levy. Do we need more? Probably, but we're trying to be realistic and we're trying to ask for what we think is our best option at this time.
Mr. Seymour, over the 14-year period that you just gave us, what's been the percentage of increase of staff salaries, teacher salaries over a 14-year period? What percentage?
18%.
18%. We've increased 18% in 14 years.
Right.
Okay. Wow. That's unheard of. 18% in 14 years.
So less than 1.5%.
Less than.
Less than. Probably close to 1.
I've never heard of such. But
Actually, that's actually
In 14 years, how much has the budget of Winton Woods School District increased? Do you know?
Sorry, can't
The
answer that
overall
right now.
budget of Winton Woods School District, how much has it increased? Or do you know that?
I do not know that with confidence 14 years ago to today. Sorry.
Has it increased?
Yes, it has increased, yes.
Probably a lot more than 1%.
Yes.
But I think one of the things you brought up is just the uncertainty in the budget.
Mhm.
That every 2 years it could change. So no matter what they say they're going to do, 2 years it could totally reverse.
We've had 4 funding formulas since I've been the treasurer of Winton Woods.
Yeah, which is
Only been 10 years.
10
so.
years. So, and I think, was it you that told us we've had like 13 different programs?
We've had 13 funding formulas.
Yeah. Since they declared the funding formula
Since they declared it.
unconstitutional.
And,
Right.
and not one of them, I believe, has ever come to its full potential as originally passed.
Right. Okay.
All right, Board, let's get a motion
Yep.
on the floor, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution declaring it necessary to levy a tax in excess of the 10 mil limitation as presented. The levy is for the purpose of providing for the emergency requirements of the school district by providing operating funds in the amount of $3 million per year for a 5-year period.
I'll second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any other questions for discussion?
Not a question, just a statement, I think, just to highlight what Mr. Seymour was saying, and that, you know, this is 5 years. If the state comes through and we don't need more money, then this could go away, potentially at the end of 5 years. The chance of that happening is probably slim, but the need for it could change. So, thank you.
Thank you, Board. Anyone else have discussion, statements? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, would you please call the vote?
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan's?
Aye.
Dr. Johnson?
Aye. That vote passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Seymour.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is 8.01, which is the reports of the Superintendent of School Reports. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Yes, Madam President. As you guys know, we've had numerous visitors come and give quotes about scores and how things are working in the district, and I think Dr. Cupoletti at the last meeting had a strong objection to your information is not accurate, and he is accurate. So what we wanted to do is to give you a sample of what we look like with data, and we're going to just do a snapshot of data. However, we have data tracking meetings, and since COVID, we've not run the SAC and TAC, Student Achievement Committee and the Technology Achievement Committee, which is a committee combined together. But these committees will resume on January 19th. So there will be data information and data meetings. I know that Dr. Johnson has frequented many of the meetings, as well as Dr. Cupoletti, and of course, Doc, you would have to assign a liaison to come to those meetings. It's always going to be about data, how we're doing academically in comparison to other districts, in comparison to ourselves, in comparison to grade level. So we're going to have 3 reports, but the reports are only going to give you a synopsis about where we are, and then we'll take a deeper dive in January where we have different results to share with the board. Okay, so who's up first? Dr. Martin? Mr. Bird, if you can give me the name of the gentleman, we're going to actually invite him to come to SAC. Okay.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Adrian Martin, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning for Pre-K 6. And as Mr. Smith mentioned, we're going to give an overview, just a very brief overview of some of the data that's presented in the 2021 local report card. And ODE actually did give us information as it relates to the components on the report card, but there is no rating. And the whole purpose of giving us data is for us to have some type of recovery and make improvement efforts within the district. So what we are going to do is actually go over various components of the state report card for 2021, just to give you an idea of the difference of the achievement that our students made and the growth that they actually made as well. So as it relates to ELA for 3rd grade, it's 35.4% proficient. 4th grade is 28.0% proficient. 5th grade is 46.1% proficient. 6th grade ELA is 32.7% proficient. And when we look at our math scores for 3rd grade, 25.3%. 4th grade is 37.1%. 5th grade is 20%, and 6th grade is 16.3%. And with this information, it's actually, for this particular component, it represents whether students' performance on the state tests meet established thresholds and how well students performed overall.
So may I ask then, for, let's say, the fourth grade math, 37% of the students have achieved the required level of achievement, yes?
That is correct.
And for when they don't, what is the solution or action taken by the school district?
We have various supports in place when we look at our multi-tiered systems of supports. So in various tiers, the students are actually getting additional support throughout the school day. In the South Campus, we do have math title at each grade level so that we can support our students and give them the tools that they need to be successful on these assessments. And we also have ST Math, which is a program that they navigate through to get their skills enhanced and their ability to perform the concepts within that appear on that actual assessment.
Okay, so for I'm sorry to take so much time.
It's okay.
For a student who doesn't achieve to the proper cutoff, that would be those who are not in 37.1%, they continue to get support so that their math scores, their math achievement, their math skills improve, yes?
Yes, they do. In this past summer, we actually had a very robust summer school to support our students as well. So we're looking to and encourage that our students will perform even better on the next assessment as we provide them the tools they need to be successful.
Okay, so I think it's important for the public to understand that this isn't a grade, right?
Correct. It's
This
no grade.
is just a cutoff, a snapshot, and for those who don't fit into that, they are still going to get additional training.
Yes,
Okay. Thank you.
you're welcome. This particular slide actually gives an overview of how the district performed in comparison to similar districts, as well as the state. The first bar is Winton Woods. The middle bar is the similar districts, and the last bar is the state of Ohio. So you can kind of see where we fared as it relates to other districts in the state of Ohio.
Is there a particular reason why we're doing better at the fifth grade level?
Well, in regards to the fifth grade students that are within this particular data set, did do rather well pre-COVID because the 18-19 school year, there was no grade given or no data presented on the state report card. So I think it's just more intense instruction and intervention that the students had as they navigated from one building, which was the 3-4 building, to the 5-6 building.
Dr. Martin, can you explain to us how the district being in safe harbor, these numbers affect that? Because we were in safe harbor up until what year was that?
Yeah, we had, Safe Harbor was early on.
Was it like 18? Did we come out of it in 2018, or were we out of it before then?
I think we were out of it before then, before this particular data set was actually presented.
I just know we have made some changes to, the academics during that time. So I didn't know whether there was anything to show where we were during the safe harbor time. I know we were in a low grade area, but the district had made some significant changes academically, so I didn't know whether there was any comparison data for that.
Right. The one piece of curricular that was added that does enhance this is the ST Math, where the students are actually navigating through the program where they're able to actually enhance their skills and ability to be able to perform and complete the various concepts on the assessment. And prior to that, it was investigations, and we still have investigations math, which is an inductive approach to how students actually solve problems. So I think along with project-based learning and problem-based learning, the students are actually getting a lot of the tools that they need in order to perform on these assessments.
Now, if you remember, we shifted from a paper assessment to a tech assessment. And one of the things we realized by having conversations with teachers and students, they would start the assessment and then a question would come up and maybe a protractor or a ruler would pop up and the kids were figuring out, what am I supposed to do with this? And so we had to kind of figure out how to teach them how to not just take the test, but how to maneuver through the device. And that took some doing. There were times where we had some power failures and some outages. And when it brought the kid back up to where they were, like if you're on test question number 5, that was a good thing. But if it took them all the way back, the kid was like, I don't really know what to do with this. So getting the technology part of it together, moving into the new buildings, I'm assured that there will be some different results because kids are going to be more familiar with the device as opposed to giving them the device as opposed to pencil and paper. We knew we would have to get the device sooner or later. We could stall out and keep going pencil paper until the state says that's no longer an option.
And for another piece of this, because for the English language arts, which is the reading piece, the Striving Readers Grant and the sustainable work that was done within that scope and sequence of events for our staff and our students would also help our students perform a little bit more, increase their performance on these tests as well. More consistently. We were initially talking math, but in looking at this particular data set, it's the English language arts. So there's various pieces of instructional platforms that we have within the district to support the work. And improving our at-risk K-3 readers, 99.6% of our third grade students met the third grade reading guarantee requirements. In the 18-19 school year, there were 90.2% of our students that met that requirement. That requirement is not the proficient level. It's the requirement that the state has given the districts for third grade reading in order to be promoted to fourth grade. But in the pandemic, we were not held to the consequence of third grade reading guarantee for the 1920 or the 2021 school year.
So that's when that conversation gets into play, growth versus achievement. Kids are growing, however, the threshold that says, are they out of danger of having any kind of recurring things as far as failure is concerned, we still know that we have some kids that need some work. But if the bar is set here, we're at 99%, that's really not our goal. Our goal is to exceed. But as far as the state's threshold is concerned, 99% of our kids are meeting the threshold, but we don't want people to get comfortable with that. That's where we are. We need to exceed.
Need that to translate to proficient.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That's exactly what we want. And we do believe that our students will rise to the occasion.
And along that line, so the numbers we were looking at on the ELA and math, those are the state proficient scores for us. What do we do, I think, from a measurement standpoint as we're working through the year to figure out where our students are, how they're progressing through the proficient process, I guess, and identify who needs help to be moved up?
Yeah, for the K-3 readers, we have, each of our students are on reading improvement plans. And when they're on those plans, they're either on track or off track. Now, each child has a plan, and once they are assessed and they move to on track, then we provide them additional support to keep them going. Because getting on track does not necessarily mean
That's
that
not
you're
the end.
there,
Yeah.
but to provide them what they need in order to move them where they need to go. So those plans help us inform a lot of the decisions that are made as it relates to our students in the elementary grades.
Yeah, the one thing that we cannot afford to do, so as Dr. Martin mentioned, you have a student who's barely on track, but they're on track. Okay, there's some students that are just very, very low. And we can create this barrier that says, we don't have the resources to deal with the kid who's very low. Because this kid who's on track, let him go on his way. But he's barely on track. So he still needs some resources.
Because he's going to be off track.
Absolutely.
Right.
Eventually he will be off track. And so what we had to keep working through is going out, making sure that every child has an opportunity with the reading improvement plans that Dr. Martin just mentioned, that no matter if you're there, how do we keep you there, and then how do we make sure that you exceed?
Okay, for the next slide, for improving at-risk K-3 readers, we have 35.4% of our third grade students who perform proficient on the state English language arts assessment.
How do they take into account students that are, their primary language is a different language? It's not English. Because we know we've got 32 different languages spoken in the district. How is that taken into account? Not taken into account as far as the is concerned?
It's not necessarily separate from the whole percentage of 35.4%. It's inclusive in that number for the district as a third grade student.
And Mr. B, that's a great question, but what we want to try to make sure that we do is when we start showing parallels between students who have language barriers and students who this is their native language, English, and we start making those comparisons, the public is going to grab hold of that and say, these are the kids who are bringing you down. Why do we have so many? We can't control that. But that becomes a narrative, and we don't ever want to play that out because I think it would be disrespectful to every kid who has a language issue.
No, I totally agree. That's not where I was going with that at all. It was more a question of the state does not take that into account.
Right.
Our objective is to still do the best we
Yeah.
can for those students, no matter what their primary language is. But this doesn't take it into account because it doesn't make, if you're sitting here looking at numbers, it's like, okay, 99.6% of or 96% of the students pass the third grade, reading guarantee, but you're 35.4%
And it doesn't
proficient.
take into
Those
account,
numbers
though,
don't make a ton of sense just if you look at them without any narrative as to how you get there.
And it doesn't take
Right.
into account the poverty. There are other
Right.
variables that
Yeah.
it's just there.
Yeah.
Yes.
To be fair, you haven't actually given data that says that students who have a language other than English do any worse or any better. So we can't really judge that without the data. So just to be sure that we're not casting aspersions on students who have a different language at home, maybe they do better.
We do have information.
I know, but we haven't presented it, right?
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
but for me, it's a public information point
Absolutely.
where if you're comparing Winton Woods School District to another school district that only has 2% of students that are English as a second language, you're going to get different results from a proficiency standpoint.
The other part, Mr. Beardbury, is you talk about kids who have parents who speak the language, and you talk about a difference in kids that English is their foreign language. However, their parents are here, but they're doctors and engineers and stuff, which is a different concept based on, here's a kid who came from somewhere else, like our kids, but he had a different background starting out. That's a whole different, you know, there are other districts who have a large population of students that are foreign descent, but what are the backgrounds of those kids?
And we also have ESL tutors in the classroom to support the ESL students. So they're getting additional support. So some of them may be getting title as well as ESL tutoring or ESL services. So we are definitely supporting our EL population of students within the building. With this slide, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ragland, or did you want me to go through the rest of it?
What I mentioned to the board is that because the one thing about Dr. Martin and Dr. Ragland, as well as Tanya Bray, they can give you data and talk about the results, and we could be here to 11 o'clock at night, because each one of their slides can be that powerful. But what we want to do is give you a snapshot of where we're going, and these things will actually be enhanced in the SAC. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
They worked on this, so when I told them that it's just going to be a snapshot, they gave me bad news, but we'll get past it.
They knew there'd be a quiz.
Good evening, Board. So I'm going to talk about the achievement for secondary. And so with regard to achievement, just to put it all into context, achievement is how well a child has learned skills in a subject compared to similar students, in this case statewide, because this is our state test. So in ELA in 7th grade, we had 28.6% proficient. In the 8th grade, we had 22.3% proficient. The 9th grade is not applicable. We do not have or test 9th graders any longer. We used to have that test. It was the ELA 1 test. The state has removed that from testing. And then we have the 10th graders who take the ELA 2, and there were 44.6% of them who were proficient. In 7th grade for math, we had 6.5% proficient. In 8th grade, 22.3% proficient. 9th grade, 26.2%, and that would be the Algebra 1 end of course exam. And then in 10th grade, we had 9.3% proficient in the geometry test. And so this next slide presents growth, which is different. And so here's the visual, not so much numbers, because in terms of growth, we're looking at where our students, or how they performed relative to their past performance, as well as performance in comparison to other students across the state. And so what you want to look for as a reference is the dashed green, or the dashed black line, excuse me. And what's important to note is that our 7th graders in English Language Arts made more progress than expected. Moderate evidence of that, and so that's why you see their dot located to the right of the black dashed line. And in comparison, our 8th graders also made more progress than expected, and so they're to the left slightly, but they're still within that green area, the Kelly green area. And so what we want to see when it comes to growth is for our students to land in the Kelly green and or the dark green area. And so what this slide says is that contrary to our achievement, meaning students score proficient or higher, which is the state benchmark, our students are definitely making lots of progress. They have grown quite a bit in comparison to their previous performance. This slide shows mathematics for 7th and 8th grade. Here, 7th grade also made more progress than expected. And here, 8th grade made more progress than expected. And so there's significant evidence, and that is why they are in the far right in the dark green category. And then for high school, our ELA 2 or English Language Arts 2 test, those students made more progress than expected. There was significant evidence. Again, they're in the dark green, far right of the dashed black line. Our Algebra 1 test, they're on the dashed line, so they made significant progress. Also, our geometry, however, is in the orange. They're to the left of the black dashed line. And so our geometry students did not grow as much in comparison to our Algebra 1 or ELA 2 students. And so we still have some work to do with growth there. And our graduation highlight. So this is the 4-year graduation rate. Students in the class of 2020 who graduated within 4 years. These are the students who entered 9th grade in the fall of 2016 and graduated by the summer of 2020. And so that is 89.1%. And the district exceeds the state, which as a state was 87.2%, and similar districts' graduation rates, which were 88.7% on average. And our 5-year graduation rate is 85.2%. So the 5-year graduation rate applies to students in the class of 2019 who graduated within 5 years. And these are students who entered 9th grade in the fall of 2015 and graduated by the summer of 2020. We had 110 students who were prepared for success by earning remediation-free scores on all parts of the ACT or SAT, honors diplomas, or industry credit. And then finally, we have 40 students who were prepared for success. These are students who earned what they earned on the previous slide, but also earned above a 3 or higher on the AP and are at least 3 college credits before leaving high school. Any questions about the slides? Yes?
What's the plan? Go back one. No, okay. Go to the next one, sorry. What's the plan? No, forward.
Oh.
What's the plan to
This one?
increase, go back one to 40? Yeah. What's the plan to increase a 3 or higher on the AP? What plans are in place so the board can understand what we have in place to increase that number from not 40, but 80 or 60 or whatever the case may be?
So of course we need to identify more students who are willing to participate in AP classes. We definitely have students in our middle school who are taking advanced courses, so they're taking Algebra 1 or Geometry right now on our high school, and so we are looking to develop them, create our talent pipeline. We have AccuPlacer testing that we can do in-house now because we are in partnership with Cincinnati State, and because of that, that removes barriers. We don't have to rely on students being able to find their own transportation, and we have those classes, CCP as well as AP, being offered here at our high school.
The public focuses apparently, according to our last meeting, on A, B, C, D test ratings. Looking at the distribution of ratings in the state of Ohio, it is my understanding that it is not a normal distribution as would be expected for an A, B, C, D normal curve. Therefore, it is very misleading to assign a letter grade to the achievement of a school based on the assumption that it's a normal distribution curve. So I think we need to have some kind of education for our public to understand that you can't just say we're a B or an A or an F, because it doesn't reflect what they may be thinking when they were in high school and they got an F, right? Because the distribution of the grades in the state of Ohio, and I've looked at all of the grades given to all of the schools in the state of Ohio, and I have found that it's actually B's and D's have higher numbers than C's, which points out that it is not a normal distribution of grades. So I know it's very complex mathematics for all of us, but it shouldn't be simplified by the public, that they understand where we stand in the state of Ohio simply because a letter is given. So I think it would be useful sometime to have a little bit of maybe a canned educational talk so that people could understand that. So you would expect a normal distribution to be like this, with 90% A's, 10% F's, and 2/3 about in the C. But you don't see that when you look at the grades in the state of Ohio. And those numbers, or those grades, are all on the state website. But it takes a long time to go through the data. But anyway, my point is that we had speakers come here last month and explain to us what our grades were. Unfortunately, they probably don't understand the significance of what they're saying based on the expectation that it would be a normal distribution. So I just wonder that, I don't know whose pocket that would be in, but it might be useful sometime to be able to explain to people, no, a B is not what you think a B is, right? So I'm sorry, I wanted to make sure that
I
we,
think your assessment, Dr. Cooperlady, about the normal curve, the cell-shaped curve is accurate. You have the 90% and the 10% on either part of the spectrum. But the numbers in between is showing you, when you look at those schools across the state, you thought you were going to see something that you did not see.
yes,
Right?
yes,
And it probably surprised you, like, wait a minute, where are all these A's and, yeah, okay.
yeah.
Got it.
One thing I do want to point out relative to this visual with regard to our progress is that in spite of what our achievement scores are, we made great progress last year coming out of a pandemic, and we're still actually in a pandemic, but last year was different. Students were at home, they were virtual, they were blended, then they came to school fourth quarter, and throughout all of that, we can say that our scores relative to other scores across the state, our students showed significant growth in most grade levels, in most subject areas overwhelmingly, and we can dive into this deeper in January at our next meeting. But that is the truth, based on their past performance, even in our district, and in comparison to the rest of the state, our students progressed.
So to put it simply, the job of a school is to teach so that the students progress.
Correct.
And we apparently are doing a fantastic job of doing that according to the graphs you have shown. So it's not, we shouldn't be focusing on where they are today. We should be focusing on what we do as an educational institution to make them progress, and this is really positive.
It is.
So deeper dive, in January, we get to all the numbers and all the grade levels, and we can break it down, even by agenda. So, stay tuned. This is on for the next piece, which is students with disabilities.
It's good information.
So good evening. My name is Tanya Bram, Director of Student Services for Winton City Schools. So I think it's a great segue to talk about our students who are currently in a pandemic. And like Dr. Ragland stated, they were in and out, remote, at home, then came to school fourth quarter. And with that being said, students with disabilities, our latest profile was, even though we were in a major pandemic, our district met requirements for Winton City Schools. So the information that I'm going to share with you is the 5-year data overview. And so the information will be for school years 2015 through 16, school year 2020 through 2021. That's a tongue twister. And so the graphs you'll see will be percentages of students with disabilities compared to districts across the state. And then also the disability distribution. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act of 2004 established a series of special education indicators to measure services and outcomes for children with disabilities. So what that is annually, districts receive a special education profile that shows progress over time in meeting goals for students with disabilities. So this is something that we have to share and show every year. So this data is used to inform districts on how to improve academics for students with disabilities and to also see how we can change our special education programming. So again, this is a 5-year overview compared to Winton City Schools compared to the state of Ohio and the districts across the state. And so this is our disability distribution. So for school year 2021, Winton City Schools, our disability was 16% compared to the state of Ohio, which is 15.4. In year 2018-19, 15%. Compared to the state, again, 15%. So we were kind of equal to districts across the state. School year 2017-18, 15.16%. In the state of Ohio, 14.82%. And then so on. School year 2016-17, Winton City Schools, 16.48%. Compared to other districts across the state, 14.8, and then 2015-16, Winton City Schools, 16.24, compared to other districts in the state, 14.8. So this was last year's. So this is our distribution with Winton Woods on the left. Let me get my graph. Percentage of students with disabilities compared to other districts in the state of Ohio. So as you can see on the left graph, we're pretty aligned with other districts across the state. And the graphic organizer to your right is the disability distribution. So those are disability categories. And again, we're pretty aligned with other districts across the state. This is 2018-19. Again, to the left, it is the disability distribution of disabilities. To your left is Winton Woods compared to the state of Ohio. We're aligned. In the distribution categories, to your right, we're pretty aligned with other districts across the state. This is 2017-18. (2016-17). We're still pretty aligned with other districts across the state. And finally, 2015-16. So the reason why I'm showing these graphs is because our district is pretty proportionate compared to other districts across the state. We're not over-identifying in a particular category, disability category. So we're pretty aligned to other districts as it compares to Winton Woods in the state of Ohio. Are there any questions?
Question, get my voice to talk. The students with disabilities, they're still required to take the state testing just like everybody else. So what impact does that have on, has to have an impact on the numbers? So, can you
Yes.
speak to that?
Yes, it greatly does. So when we look at testing for students with disabilities, when they're in those testing grades, when we're meeting, or when the teams are meeting, they determine whether or not students should be exempt. And for the most part, students are not exempt. So they are held to the same standard to take the test and to pass the test. Unfortunately, they have a disability, but that should not stop them from taking the test like any other typical student, except for those students who have to take the alternate assessment. So high standards is what we breed on. We want our students to be able to achieve like all the other typical students. Now their route may be different. There may be different strategies to put in place, but they are still held to the same standards.
Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
we're the same distribution as the rest of the state. Do we get the same amount of funding as the rest of the state for students with disabilities?
That may be a Randy question. However, it really depends on the disability category and the number of students in our district. So there could be, let's look at Cincinnati Public Schools. They have more students in their district than we do. Perhaps their percentage may be similar, but because they have a larger pool of students, I'm assuming perhaps they get funded more. Randy, can you answer that?
You get funded based on category. Speech is not as a certain percentage, and then clear up to your multi-handicapped.
Well, I think the other part is, getting
Thank
funded
you.
based on category is one piece. But when that student has to have a one-on-one with an aide, that's a different price. So that IEP determines what services we have to provide, and that cost varies. It depends on if a kid gets OT, PT, whatever the process may be. So you could actually have a student who just totally exceeds the threshold based on what the state allows.
In
I mean,
addition-
by big numbers.
Right.
We also get what's called catastrophic reimbursement for highly expensive children in special ed.
Yeah, I was going to mention that in
Yeah.
addition to special education transportation, we get reimbursed for that as well. And then those other services, as mentioned, for related services and psych services. We also get reimbursed for that. And nursing services, if students require medical services to participate in the educational setting. Are there any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was very informative. I think the presentations were very informative and allow us to put some information and tools in our toolbox that will help us to explain, so we appreciate Mr. Smith and staff for giving us that information.
I think, Dr. Johnson, if when people start coming to the SAC and we start meeting regularly again, I think it'll really shed the light on where we are as a district and what our growth target looks like, as opposed to proficiency, achievement, whatever the case may be. Because we would have to go back and reframe ourselves to look, where did this kid start and where is he now?
That's exactly right.
Okay? And if they stay with us, then it's a whole different story. One of the things that we try to stop parents from doing is pulling kids out and putting them into other institutions, because when they come back, I think Mr. Denny and I ran some data patterns when I first came, it is always very, very slightly different to the negative once they come back, and now we have to restore that all over again.
Thank you. I think Dr. Cupoletti also made a good point, looking at, A, B, C, D, and the category of numbers where they fall. Just doesn't make sense
doesn't
as
fit.
an educator. There's just the law of averages, the way things are supposed to be. So, and everybody wants a B, C, D, E, F grade, as opposed to looking at the value added or the growth. And that's really what educators do. So we appreciate that information. The next item on the agenda is 8.02, which is the October average daily membership. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
So, Dr. Johnson and Board, the average daily membership as of 10/10/2021 is 4,008 students as of 10/10. And we're going to keep giving the updates for that, but I think the other thing that I'll bring back to you next month, or even in a work session, what that looks like based on grade levels, and we'll break it down for male, female, and give you the whole categories of where we are. Okay?
All right, thank you, Mr. Smith. The next item on the agenda is 8.03, which is the first reads for new and revised board policies. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Yes, Madam President. The first one is a new policy, 5464, and it's early high school graduation. These are revised policies, the next 6, 5200, students' attendance, 5350, which is a very, very hot topic all across the state, student mental health and suicide prevention, 5516, student hazing. I'm going to come back to 5516 because I want to elaborate on that just for a little bit. And 5630.01, positive behavior intervention and supports and limited use of restraint and seclusion. 6114, finances, cost, principal, spending federal funds. And 7300, property, disposition of real property and personal property. But back to the student mental health and back to the hazing part, 5516. What we've realized by having conversation with the administrators, the executive team, as well as the teaching and learning department, we've realized that students, when they were remote, we had no suspensions or expulsions, right? Okay. However, the students are now in these categories where they're now doing all of these different things on their Chromebooks and making statements and whatever, and now you get a chance to see me face to face, okay? Because it was totally out of sight, out of mind. So in superintendent meetings, these are the same conversations that all superintendents are having, like our kids are becoming more assertive, but it's almost like you've been kind of harassing me or having conflicts with me for 5 months. Now I get to see you again in real time. And the place that you want to try to resolve that issue is in the school. So we've been actually working with students about, posting. When you post these things, they go all over the place. When you send this information, it stays with you, and that other kid does not forget. So these conflict resolutions that we've been trying to address, and again, like every other district, we've actually figured out that some of these things started in March, and the kid is trying to resolve his issue in November. So we're going to keep plugging away, but it was a very interesting discovery when you have a sit down with the kids, when you're doing the restorative practice conversation. This kid is saying, this happened last year. And we're saying, well, why didn't you guys try to work it out? Because I never saw him again until now. So
there we are. So we're going to actually try to do more with the student mental health piece of it, because I think every district is having that same issue. It's not that students are becoming more aggressive. I think they're just becoming more of, the confrontation is more in your face now. I get to see you as opposed to just see what you tagged on me. So these are actually first reads for to be voted on in the January meeting. Any questions or comments on the first reads? All right. Next is 8.04, I believe, and that is facilities update. Mr. Denny.
Yes, Mr. Denny. And we will vote on these next meeting. These first reads, they'll be second reads.
It's December.
In December, yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Denny.
Thanks, Dr. Johnson. Good evening, Board. Thanks, Mr. Smith. Hope everyone's doing well, and wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. Happy to provide a brief update just on facility progress. You can see we continue to see changes here and there. We've coming very close to completion of the site work. Just a few outstanding items. We actually did the punch list walk. The engineers did it last Monday, a week ago today, and the owner's rep and the construction management firm, we did the site walk for punch list for the site work this past Friday. So hopefully we'll get some of these items that we observed. We'd like to see some changes and improvements, get those things corrected, and we'll continue to advance the work. Not a lot of work happening in the winter. We're going to hopefully get some sidewalks that's remaining to be done, taken care of, but hopefully we'll have the opportunity to look at additional landscaping in the future, like in the springtime when it's time to plant again. Also engaged in warranty work right now. We have thousands and thousands of pages of manuals and owners' operating manuals and things of that nature coming into the district to be stored and shared with various parties that need access to that. I'll give you a quick example. The HVAC manual for this building alone is 33,260 pages. It's over 3,200 pages just for one system in this one building. So that's almost a ream of paper. A box of paper is what, 5,000 sheets. So we're like 70% of a box of paper for the manual. But it's necessary, and you never know when you need that information. So we're continuing to work on that. Very exciting, riveting things, but it's important. And we're continuing to make progress on that in the background.
Yeah, one great thing that happened, there were some cheerleaders that were complaining that they're being distracted during cheerleading practice. And of course, we have a lot of glass. And they brought the concern to Mr. Denny, who brought it to me, and we came up with a very ingenious kind of filter over the windows that looks really, really nice. If that light were to come back, Mr. Denny, can you walk out in the hallway and see if that light can come on? You can see one of the filters, and it's actually one in the MH room because they wanted more privacy. So you see the filter that's over the window now?
Oh, the WW.
Yes, with the blue and green. You see it, Mr. McGowan?
I do.
Okay, so we have that film actually over some of the gym windows that kind of prevents people from looking in and distracting folks, which is, it's attractive to me, but I think it's also a safety feature. And rather than just people start sticking all kinds of things on the window to cover up, we went with something that's going to be more aesthetic. So, yeah, bravo on that one.
Yeah, thanks.
That turned out pretty good.
It did. The graphic
Yeah.
designers did a nice job with it. And the reason you've got so much glass in the door to begin with is, like Mr. Smith said, it's a safety issue. You don't want to throw that door open and not see that there's somebody
Right.
on the other side and hit them. But on the other hand, you have high school at lunch and middle school in gym class at PE. That's an interesting.
Basically, middle school boys
observation.
looking at cheerleading opportunities. Basically, that's what it turned
They
into.
just can't
Okay.
concentrate. Come
Yes,
on.
yes, sir. We've done everything we could to prevent it, but they're still like there.
Some things never change.
Yeah. All right.
But yeah, we continue to make improvements, the kind of improvements you don't really realize until you occupy the space.
Absolutely. And so we don't even really look at these as complaints. They're like enhancements. And the way people are bringing them out, I think what makes it so much, so nice is
when they say that there's a concern that makes sense, that it is addressed very quickly, as opposed to waiting, months and months and months. So this was a quick one. So that was a quick fix. That's very
Thanks,
good.
appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
That basically concludes the report. That's the activity that's demolition, sorry. There is demolition going on in the district as well, and abatement, and that's at Primary South and Elementary School. But that's continuing on schedule, and we expect to see, actually, I believe they started at Primary South today. I need to drive down there and check on that, but Elementary School is coming.
If you get an opportunity on the South Campus to go in the courtyard, you don't really even need a microphone. The way it's designed with the acoustics, it is actually a perfect design for music, for choirs, for speeches, without the need of any kind of electronic device. I don't know how it turned out that way, but it's absolutely perfect.
Yeah, it's a great space.
Very good.
Yeah, okay.
I actually spoke in that space. I sounded like, I think it's Barry White. I sounded pretty good. So, yeah. If you want to hear some of my stuff, come to that space. I know you can't wait, Mr. McGowan.
In that space. That's crazy.
Thanks, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Denny.
They
As
didn't say
always, we
Morgan
appreciate
Freeman.
this information, and
Didn't say
it's
Morgan
exciting to
Freeman.
hear,
Yeah.
the little things that are getting done. Like you say, you don't know until you live in a space and move around to see what needs to be done, but it's still very exciting. And the demolition, if anyone wants to see those buildings before they get, you might want to take a drive around, take your last pictures or whatever. So you said the elementary school and the South Campus schools, right?
They're going to be phased apart slightly. Elementary school is going to be starting probably in December.
That's the one on Kingsbury?
Yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
The bridge. That's what we
And
call
the
it.
bridge.
The bridge.
Oh, gosh.
Famous bridge.
Yes,
What we
yes,
have
yes.
discovered, Dr. Johnson, based on, we kind of thought it might be right, but with the buildings demolished, the property has more value.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, we talked about that.
Yes. So that's turning out to be true.
Okay, very good. The next item on the agenda is 9.01, the superintendent's recommendations for the personnel schedules. Superintendent Smith, you have the floor.
Yes, Madam President, Mrs. Wilson will come up and give the overview of the personnel schedules.
Okay.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
Before you have Schedules A, which is resignations, B, certificated staff, C, support staff, D, supplementals, and E, leaves. And so I respectfully request approval of the schedules as presented.
Okay, Board, a motion will be in order to approve schedules A, B, C, D, and E.
I'll make a motion to approve the personnel schedules A through E as presented.
I'll second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion?
Not necessarily discussion, but I am interested. I want to meet this person. I've heard of every university that we've ever done. I mean, I've heard of these before, including Plymouth State. I've never heard of the Institute Superior Pedagogical Republic of Peru. Never heard that one. So I want to kind of see this person's background and see how they work with our kids. I would be very curious. She is an ESL tutor, ESL aide at the South Campus, and of course this is a replacement. So I'm curious.
Just goes to show we cast a wide net.
Yes, yes.
I didn't know there was a republic, well, again.
Oh, Peru?
Yes, I knew
Okay.
there was a republic, but not a university.
Interesting. Okay, if there's not any other discussion, Mr. Seymour, would you please call that vote?
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan's?
Aye.
Dr. Johnson?
Aye. That vote passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. The next item on the agenda is 9.02, which is the proposal for an overnight extended student trip, Winwoods High School, Academy of Global Studies, 9th grade, to Howell and Detroit, Michigan, for March 9th through the 11th, 2020. It's interesting, we haven't had a trip in so long.
Yeah.
It was like, what, trips? Mr. Smith?
This one looks like it might include COVID testing before they go.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes, it
Yes,
did.
it is. And so there will be the COVID protocol, COVID testing, and we're also going to have some conversations with parents in the parent group about the vaccine, because I think it's very important. When we start taking our kids other places, we have to make sure that we're protecting them with a level of integrity. One of the students came to me, we were talking about the trip, and I saw her in the distributed dining area. She says, are we going on any trips? And I said, I hope that happens, based on COVID and the mask and the vaccine and whatever. And she says, well, I've received my vaccine. And she says, but I'm just curious that we're allowing football players to go places. And I said, you make a good point. So I will be looking at your trip. And I'm saying that I don't know which one of your administrators set me up for that, but I'll be looking at your trip the next board meeting so that you know that we're looking at it in a different way. But these trips are these overnight extended opportunities. Kids come back with a different attitude about school and a different attitude about project-based learning. One of the things that I can tell you, many of our kids have been places, but they haven't been places together. And so I think it bonds them in a different way, more so than what happens in that immediate classroom. We encourage parents to allow them to go. Even students who may be struggling academically, we don't use it as a deterrent to say you shouldn't go. We're saying that this might enhance you where you want to be a better student in our district. So the recommendations to approve the proposal for overnight extended student trip, Winton School Academy of Global Studies, 9th grade, Howell in Detroit, Michigan, March 9th to 11th, as presented.
Board, a motion will be in order.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the proposal for overnight extended student trip, Winton Woods High School Academy of Global Studies, 9th grade, Howell and Detroit, Michigan, March 9th through 11th, 2022, as presented.
I'll second.
It's been motion and second. Are there any other questions or discussion? I will say I was excited to see trips back on the agenda. And also that COVID and vaccinations and that was, addressed in their
Absolutely.
proposal. We're not just doing this willy-nilly, taking kids, away from safe, environments. So I was happy to see that.
The downside of it, Dr. Johnson and board, is there were some kids who never got that experience.
Right.
Because COVID came and they never did get the bonding experience that they would have received with their peers. But every year we don't do it, it just sends another group back off of not being able to recognize that going on this trip with my peers actually bonds me to my school. So we can't do anything about the
And actually,
past.
2020, we had some trips planned that
Yeah,
had to
we
be
did.
canceled.
We did.
So
We
yes,
absolutely
it's
did.
really nice to see. 2021, we didn't even
So
approach the subject,
So the recommendation for 9.03 is to approve the proposal for overnight extended student trip Winton Woods High School Academy of Global Studies, grade 11, Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia, and that again is March 9 through 12.
Okay, you skipped. We didn't vote yet for
I'm sorry.
9.02.
Okay.
Mr. Seymour, would you call that vote?
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowans?
Aye.
Dr. Johnson?
Aye. Now we're at 9.03, Mr. Smith, so you can go ahead and talk a little bit about that one too.
Yeah, this one actually is for juniors, and again, the seniors didn't get to do it. They're seniors now, and it's hard to go back and try to replace and refix things that they never got the opportunity to do, because they come back and they have so much excitement about the opportunity and what they got to see. We were excited the one year where Mr. Martin has a very good relationship with Steve Shavit, and he actually took them through some special places in DC that other school districts did not have the opportunity to get to. So having a person in DC who could kind of showcase certain things was an advantage to our kids, because they're saying, this guy must be something special because we got to see things that we normally would not see. So hopefully he's going to still be around and he could actually help showcase and show kids about some very, very special parts of Washington, D.C. The last episode that I have in my brain as it relates to Washington, D.C. was not a very good one, based on what we saw on TV. And our kids need to experience that. They saw that too. Mm-hmm. They need to see what's changed and what's different now based on what the TV kind of showed them about what's happening with people storming the Capitol. So hopefully they can reflect, and I think that people getting them ready for that will be a very, very great experience. So the recommendation is to approve the proposal for the overnight extended student trip for Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, March 9 through 12.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Board, a motion would be in order.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposal for the overnight extended student trip, Winton Woods High School Academy of Global Studies, 11th grade, to Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, March 9th to 12th, 2022, as presented.
I'll second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Any discussion?
I do have a question. Under Part E, finances, there's an explanation of the costs. Are those costs picked up by the school district?
In some cases, it depends on if the student is a homeless student, if the student is a student that has free and reduced. It depends on how much the parents can actually come through with, and we try to help facilitate it. Sometimes there are fundraisers that actually help offset the cost.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other questions or discussion, Mr. Seymour, would you please call the vote?
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Dr. Johnson?
Aye. That vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is another school trip, 9.04, proposal for overnight extended stage trip. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Yes, Madam President. This is for seniors. Again, the Academy of Global Studies to approve the proposal for an overnight extended student trip to the Windy City, March 9 through 11.
Okay, board, a motion would be in order.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposal for the overnight extended student trip, Winton Woods High School Academy of Global Studies, 12th grade, Chicago, Illinois, March 9th through the 11th, 2022, as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions for discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, would you please call that vote?
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Dr. Johnson?
Aye. That vote passes unanimously as well. The next item on the agenda is 9.05.
Yeah, Dr. Johnson and Board, there had to be some just additional pieces of information about the wellness part as it relates to policy 8510. So there was information put in about COVID and sharing food and those kinds of things that wasn't in the original policy. And then there's information about distributed dining because they keep mentioning cafeteria that we don't have intentionally. And I think one of the most important parts was restricting kids and holding them back from recess when behavior gets in the way of academics, because I think that stifles kids from having that creative opportunity and play. So in our wellness policy, it says that we don't use food to penalize kids by holding food because you can't, and we don't really want staff to hold kids back from recess and opportunities where they get a chance to use some of that energy, and maybe it's not as much energy in the classroom. So these are some of the pieces that we've added to it just to make sure that we're comprehensive about the work. And Mr. Denny's done a good job about working with the Wellness Committee to make sure there are the right people on there, to make sure that everything is ready for the board for approval, and the implementation of all the policies are set in stone. The last revision, of course, was 1112.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Board, a motion would be in order for the revised policy 8510 for operations and wellness.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the revised policy PO 8510, operations wellness, as presented.
I'll second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? I will say that I did read this and I was really excited to see that recess would no longer be taken, away from kids as a
Should've never been.
punishment. Because, especially students who have disabilities, they might get in trouble, but they need that time to go and burn off some of that energy so they can come back and sit still, in the classroom. So-
Yeah, if you don't give me that equal amount of recess, you're probably going to be penalized in the classroom.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. You're going to get more of the same. So I was glad to see that. Okay, if nothing else, Mr. Seymour, would you please call the vote?
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Dr. Johnson?
Aye. That vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 9.06, which is the second read of new and revised board policies. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Yeah, the recommendations to approve the new and revised board policies as presented, it was policy 1617, administration weapons, policy 0169.1, public participation at board meetings, which has been the hottest topic in the state, 1530, administration evaluation of principals and other administrators, policy 2271, college credit plus program, 3217, professional staff weapons, 4217, classified staff weapons, 5111, students' eligibility of resident, non-resident students, and finally 5111.02, educational opportunity for military children. We have been very fortunate, board, that people haven't tried to really disrupt our board meetings. For the most part, they've come with conversations, and the conversations I think have been civil, but there have been some boards that their new action plan, they have to have police officers at board meetings. And that's been their standard, and they're saying they're going to hold that standard until the next several years, until things calm down. People have had some conversations about vaccines, receiving the vaccine, issues about masking, issues about quarantining. It's just been a variety of things. And in some cases, in some communities, they haven't fared well. The board has not fared well with giving information to the public about how they're going to proceed. So I think we're in a good place. We're in a good position. We've not had a whole lot of issues as it relates to public participation and people storming the board. So bravo.
Thank you. Board, a motion would be in order at this time. We could put the motion on the floor, and then if you have any questions about,
Have the discussions.
and then there's discussion, because we do have some questions and discussion. So let's hear the motion first.
I'll make a motion to approve the new and revised board policies as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been motioned and seconded. And I do believe that we do have some questions or discussion around this, so
Yeah.
feel free.
I have a concern about 1617, item F, theatrical props used in appropriate settings are exception to the weapons policy. I raised this at the last meeting. My concern is the Alex Baldwin Rust incident where theatrical props were used in the appropriate setting, but unfortunately, the control mechanisms and the definitions of what is a theatrical prop are very widely, and I don't see that we have protection against accidents in item F. And that's my concern. I did raise this with Ms. Wilson, and I just, yeah.
And that would be all three weapons policies have the same language on them. So.
Yeah, this is the particular one that comes.
Yeah, as Dr. Cupoletti, theatrical props, I do understand what you're talking about. We just had the play, The Mousetrap, and the theatrical prop that was used was a gun.
Yes.
It was not a real gun, of course, but in order for the theatrical production to really take shape or move forward, there needed to be something there
No, I
to
understand.
showcase.
So, from what I understand, in the Alec Baldwin Rust situation, there were three things. One was a real gun,
Mhm.
And that's-
okay? One was not a real gun, and one was really not having anything to do with a gun. All three were present, and they were called theatrical props. So my concern is there might be a misunderstanding, and they had control people there to protect against quote misunderstandings. We don't even have that here.
So, if I may, after the last board meeting, Dr. Cupoletti raised the issue with me on the way out, and I did check, and we do not use operational guns in our school productions.
Would it be possible to slightly change this and say non-operational
Makes sense.
props
Yes,
may be used?
yes.
It's not a
I
big
was gonna ask is
change.
what language would satisfy that concern?
Very good.
Okay.
So do we need to make a motion, Randy?
Pardon me?
Do we need,
Yes.
do we need to make a motion to
To
change the
exclude-
wording on the,
Or else just bring it back to another,
That's
can
what I was
actually
getting ready
bring
to
it
say.
back.
Maybe
We
we
can
can
bring
bring
it back
those
next
three
meeting.
policies back
ask it
next
to be
board
brought
meeting.
back.
We can bring them back.
Yes.
Yes.
So, we're in the middle of a motion, but we need to
so we made a motion to approve them,
approve them.
but we don't want to approve all of them.
Right, so we need to make a motion to pull these three. Am I right? Is that how I'm gonna do that?
Or you can just amend your motion for the ones you want to adopt.
Okay, let's do that, then, if that's simple. We're gonna
Okay,
amend the
I will.
motion. that
I will
we-
amend my motion to approve revised policy PO 0169.1, revised policy PO 1530, PO policy 2271, PO policy 5111, and PO policy 511.02 to the exclusion of the weapons policies that we,
Which would be 16, 17.
yes.
Mr. Cupoletti can second it, and we're back to where we were.
Would you like to second what his amendment?
Yes, I second that amendment.
Okay.
That changed the amendment, or the amendment.
Yes.
Okay, so we're not voting on those three.
We're not voting on those three, and we'll bring
Those will
them
be brought back at the next meeting
at the next meeting.
with different wording.
But if you would
Yes.
go back and look at, I know Dr. Cupoletti referenced letter F. If you would reference letter E,
It's just a theatrical props
Yes.
language wherever it's in any of those three.
yeah, but I think the
Policy.
parenthesis actually is a different notation. Working firearms, as Ms. Wilson mentioned, ammunition shall never be approved. And so when you talk about the Alex Baldwin case, the issue was not the weapon, it was what it was, that it was loaded. That was the issue.
And they had three.
Yes, sir. And neither one of them should have been loaded.
Right.
Yes.
Well, it will be Mr. Birdie, seconded by Dr. Cupoletti, to approve the revised codes as amended by Birdie, seconded by Cupoletti, and then I will only list the ones were
Yes.
approving.
Great.
Okay?
Yes, thank you.
Just while we're actually talking about that, there is some legislation that is in House bill now for weapons. We'll talk about that during the legislative report, but, yeah, so, all right, there's nothing else, then, Mr. Seymour, would you please call that vote?
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Dr. Johnson?
Aye. That vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 10.01, which is the Board of Education reports and the legislative report. Mr. Smith, do you want to give us the updates that you have? The only thing I was going to talk about
I'll
is
defer
this.
to you. Yes.
Okay, the only thing I had to talk about was the 2 dangerous gun bills that are now in debate at the Ohio State House. And they're currently on the floor, House Bill 99, which wants to arm teachers with inadequate training paid for by the taxpayer dollars. And House Bill 227, which will eliminate our successful concealed to carry program in Ohio, allowing Ohioans to openly carry firearms without any training in our communities. Those are being debated right now. I'm not sure, I lost track, did they actually vote for it or not?
Well, Doc, I think the one thing that makes it a mystery for the state of Ohio is our neighboring state, Kentucky, has a different set of standards on it.
Right.
Their piece is carry at your own, whenever. And I think that changes it, especially when you have a neighboring state so close by. People think that that becomes the norm of what we all should be doing.
Right. And they think that since we're right next door,
Yes.
they can drive across state lines and do the same thing. That was the hot point for me when I was looking at the legislative stuff. We have a no weapons, policy on our campus, and I think it should stay that way, regardless of what happens here. So that was the only hot button thing that I seen. So.
Yeah, I think the other thing for the district is when they talk about the training process, who's responsible for that? And you're talking about people having concealed carry permits, who pays for that, and where do you get to carry it? How often you get to carry it, and who gets to carry it? That would be a concern for me.
Exactly. I have to go back and read up. I know that there was some discussion on the floor.
Lots.
And I didn't really catch the whole thing. I was trying to catch up with it, but that was the thing. And I think that we know that we need more SROs in our buildings, but we do not want our teachers or our administrators who are not trained in that area to be carrying weapons. That just doesn't sound like a good idea.
Or board members.
Or board members.
Yeah,
None of us.
Yeah, but when you look at a
Just don't think it
teacher
sounds
or an
like-
administrator discharging a firearm, there's some psychological pieces that go along with this.
Absolutely.
Even when officers discharge a firearm, they have to go through psychological, conversations with real psychiatrists about what's happened here. And I don't know how you really prepare that teacher where you discharge the firearm and then you go back in teaching Algebra 1. I don't know how that works.
I don't either.
That would just really disrupt the system, in my
And I've been
opinion.
a teacher for over 30 years, and I just can't imagine.
No.
Can't imagine it. So, all right, well, that's all I had. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Birdie, the next item is 10.02, Great Oaks Career Technical Center Report.
I sent out an email that had some documents that I normally send for the Great Oaks report. And one of those was an update by Mr. Harry Snyder that he recently sent out that actually included a link to a Channel 12 news stories that they did on trade schools and vocational schools, and interviewed some of the people from Great Oaks for that story. So it was an interesting story talking about trade school education adds $1.5 billion a year to the economy of the state of Ohio and 15,000 jobs. So just it was a positive story about the things that they can do for the students that choose to go that path. We have a spotlight on students report, and there are quite a few Winton Woods students recognized this month. And I will run through the ones that received the Scarlet Citizenship Award weekly winners. We had Brooklyn Rainey, who's a in the veterinary assisting program. Raven Lynn, who's in the exercise science and sports management program. We have LaBrea Smith, who's in the exercise science and sports program. Tommy Mays Jr., who's in automotive service technician program. And then we have Tashana Price, who's in the exercise science and sports medicine program. Like I said, there were quite a few. Darius Smith, who's in the automotive refinishing and collision program, got a placement at McCluskey Chevrolet Body Shop for a job. And then we have Kevin Gomez Castro, who is an auto service technician. He's going to be working at Performance Kings Honda. Jemiah Franklin got a placement at Banfield Pet Hospital. She was in the veterinary assisting program. And last but not least, Ashani Bourne with a health technology, who was a first quarter senior CTE Excellence Award winner.
Bravo.
Yeah, quite a few.
Very
So,
good. That's
good news.
exciting.
That is nice.
That is exciting.
Very nice.
That is exciting.
So as always, if you have any questions about any of the documents, please feel free to reach out.
Wow, our students are really shining over there. It's really great to see. Thank you, Mr. Birdie. I really appreciate that. The next item on the agenda is 11.01, which is board motions and recommendations. And I'm not aware of any board recommendations or motions that we need to make at this time. So, anybody else have anything? Okay, let's move on to 12.01, which is comments from the Board of Education Superintendent and Treasurer. Dr. Cupoletti, can we start with you?
Well, I was so impressed by the presentations of Ms. Martin, Dr. Ragland, and I've forgotten.
Ms. Bray.
Ms. Bray.
Bray.
Excuse me.
Mhm.
I'm impressed because you brought forward a way that you are self-studying the district, and also it will provide a foundation to help the community to understand the excellence that's going on here. And so I commend all three of you for what you've done, and I look forward to hearing what comes out of SAC. And I'm sorry I'm not going to be a member of this board while you're doing that, but I know that you will continue doing excellent work along these lines, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cupoletti. Next, Mr. McGowan.
Yes, I'd like to, as always, thank the administrators, thank the teachers, and normally what I say, I'd like to thank the ladies. Tonight, I'm going to say I'd like to thank Dr. Adrian Martin, Dr. Tamara Ragland, Ms. Tanya Bray, and Ms. Courtney Wilson. And there's an inside joke about that, but thank you guys so much. Want to make sure I got that out there. You like that, Mr. Smith?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, I got it. But thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Mr. McGowan. Mr. Birding.
Just, congratulations to the Winton Woods football team for Region 8 championship. That's fantastic. Hope they keep it going. We recently went to Columbus and were able to go to the Ohio School Board Association meeting, so there was some really good sessions up there that, some of them related to student achievement, and I think it's great that you guys came to this meeting, so we appreciate your participation here and really look forward to continuing the conversation in January, because I think that's important for us, and it's going to be important for the community to see that we're talking about it, especially. And outside of that, I will stop there. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Birdie. Mr. Seymour?
No, thank you.
All right, Mr. Smith?
Yes, special kudos to Mr. Denny and Mr. Martin, where they presented at Ed Spaces in Pittsburgh, and according to the participants, it was the best attended and the best overview of anything at the conference. So,
Nice.
Wonderful. Yes. And of course, Mr. Martin wasn't done, and he went on to present him and Jeremy Day at OSBA,
Yep.
and it was very, very well attended, and I think that there was a lot of buzz about people wanting to come and see Mr. Martin did make a note that that free price is gone, and so there will be a fee attached to it.
That might reduce the number of people who want to come
Well,
visit a little bit.
People
but,
still
you know.
want to come, so I was excited, when your colleagues can be out on the road and showcase great things that are happening in the school, and it's partnered by SHP giving their overview. It was a nice comparison, and I don't think SHP has actually gone out on the road and actually presented with other school districts, so it's a one-of-a-kind kind of a relationship. Mr. Denny and I are going to be presenting at South by Southwest on the great space that you guys are in today, this whole thing called the North and South Campus, so we'll let you know how it turns out. I'm hoping that eventually they will let us present in Hawaii. I mean, that one's coming up, but I don't know when that one is. So I'll let you guys know. Yeah.
I'm sure there's travel restrictions.
They're paying for it though.
Okay, we'll talk about it.
Yeah,
and I did attend the session that Mr. Martin, Mr. Day, and
It was
Mr.
really,
Parker from
really,
SHP
really powerful.
did run, and
Very,
they
very
did a
nice.
great job.
Very
so.
nice. And I am excited about the boys. Coming back from, football has its own kind of issues along the way, from injuries to COVID, and the transition of a coach and the transition of a new coach, and the kids have decided we like this guy, we like these coaches, and we want to play for them, which in turn helped them play together. So if you've had the pleasure of seeing them play, they actually act like they like playing together, which makes the band more excited and the cheerleaders more excited. And I do have to tell you that when you're winning, it's not as cold.
Something about it warmed you up.
It's just not as cold when you're winning. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
that's
good.
important. That's a new head coach, new offensive coordinator,
Totally
new defensive
new
coordinator, and they've come together.
all of the pieces, and I wouldn't say that it was our most talented team, but they are very talented.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Smith. We look forward to hearing more about your presentation at South by Southwest.
Oh, one other thing, I would love to see them play for Purcell Marion, but they're just not ready for that.
Yeah.
They're not.
No,
They are not ready.
They're not
for
ready
it.
for that.
Did you guys rehearse that?
No, they're not.
Did you all rehearse that? Okay. As Mr. McGowan said, we didn't have any district honors today, but we always want to thank our volunteers and our mentors and our stakeholders that pour into our students and that contribute to them. So thank you very much to teachers, the administrators, the staff. Of course, we're going to be out on Thanksgiving break this week, starting this week on Wednesday, right? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? And December is a music palooza for Winwood City School. It always has been, right? There's every concert, everything. I mean, so whatever, just support wherever you can. There's the a cappella and jazz, there's the winter band concert, there's the Hallelujah concert, there's the middle school choir concert. It just goes on and on and on, the band and orchestra concert. But December is a very, very busy month for us in the fine arts department. The fall play was just last week, and it was wonderful. Keeping up with everything else that's going on with the football team. Congratulations to them as they are moving forward. Keep it going. We need that championship. We need that championship ring. Everybody would, love to have that, but be safe. So with that said, one other thing I want to mention, and we'll talk about this again in December, is for us to keep in mind that the winter break is in December, and then we come back to an organizational meeting. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in December. So the next item on the agenda is 1301, which is a motion to move into executive session. And board, there is a need for an executive session this evening, so I'll entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion to go into executive session for the purpose to consider the discipline and/or dismissal of a public employee.
I'll second that motion.
It's been motioned and seconded. Mr. Seymour, would you call the
Sure. Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Dr. Johnson?
Aye. And we will prepare to move into a closed session, and we will not take any further action after we come out of executive session this evening. Therefore, I'd like to sincerely thank Tony and the Waycross Media for scheduling, for videotaping this meeting tonight. And with that said, all minds clear, we're going to exit into our executive session. I'm not sure where we're going to move to, guys, but we will move. We will move somewhere. Okay. Thank you. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Have a good evening.